You smell it first. Oil of myrrh. 6 months of it, soaked into your skin until you can't remember what you smelled like before. Your hands shake as the eunuch approaches. His footsteps echo against marble that's cold beneath your bare feet. Behind the silk curtain, you hear voices. Laughter, the clink of wine cups. You're about to walk through that curtain. You know what happened to the woman who refused. You saw the empty rooms she left behind, the servants who won't speak her name. But here's what nobody told you. What they're still hiding, even now. I'm always amazed this story finds people from Manila to Montreal. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. A palace Shushan, heart of an empire that stretched from India to Ethiopia. The year 483 BCE, an era when a king's word could erase you from existence. But this isn't about power. It's about what happens when power decides it owns not just your service, not just your loyalty, but your body, your dignity, your very name. One woman said no, just once, one refusal. What came next wasn't execution. It was something the ancient world had perfected, something far more calculated. Before dawn, someone would make a choice that doomed thousands. A letter written in blood-red ink would surface in royal archives centuries later, and the last person standing would be the one nobody expected. But what happened next broke every rule they thought they knew. Let's go back 3 days. Her name was Vashti, Queen of Persia, daughter of Persian nobility. She wasn't some outsider. She was born into this world of marble columns and golden censers. She's hosting her own banquet. The women's quarters are alive with music, lyres and flutes, the scent of saffron rice and pomegranate wine, the air thick with laughter, with freedom for just one night. Then the eunuchs arrive, 7 of them. Their silk robes whisper against the stone floors. Their faces say everything before their mouths open. The music stops. The women freeze. The king requests your presence, not requests, commands. He wants you to wear the royal crown, a pause that stretches like eternity. Only the royal crown. The room falls silent. Every woman there knows what this means. The king has been drinking for 7 days straight. 180 days of feasting before that. And now, drunk on Lydian wine, he wants to parade his queen before his military commanders. Naked, except for a crown. Vashti looks at the eunuch, at the 7 others behind him, at the women watching her, their eyes pleading silently. She speaks 3 words that change everything. I will not. The eunuch's face drains of color. His hands tremble, because he knows. He knows what refusal means in a palace where obedience is survival. In the throne room, wine cups shatter. Men gasp. A king's face turns purple with rage and humiliation. But Vashti didn't know the real danger wasn't the king's anger. It was the 7 advisors who'd been waiting for exactly this moment. Men who saw in her defiance something far more threatening than disrespect. They saw revolution. Here's what the ancient texts won't tell you directly, but it's there, in the silences between the words. Memucan, one of the 7 princes, the youngest, the most ambitious. He stands before the drunken king and delivers his verdict with the precision of a surgeon wielding a blade. If the queen's disobedience becomes known, every woman in the empire will despise her husband. Think about that. One woman's refusal. And suddenly, it's a threat to every marriage, every household, every man's authority from Persia to Egypt. Memucan wasn't protecting the king. He was protecting a system. The punishment Memucan proposes isn't death. Death would be merciful. Death would be quick. Death would make her a martyr. Instead, Vashti is stripped of her title. Banned from ever appearing before the king again. Erased. Her name becomes a warning whispered to daughters. But here's the part that makes your blood run cold. The decree is written into Persian law, unchangeable, irreversible, carved into stone tablets and sent by horseback to every corner of the empire. Every province receives the same message. Every man should be master in his own home. One woman's courage becomes the justification for legislating female submission. Across 127 provinces, 4 million square kilometers, 30 million people. And then Vashti disappears from the historical record. No tomb, no mention, no testimony, nothing. Some scholars believe she was executed quietly in the palace gardens at dawn. Others say she was sent to a distant fortress in the mountains, forbidden from ever seeing her children again. The truth? We still don't know. And that absence, that silence is the point. She became what the system needed. A ghost story. A cautionary tale. A name that makes women lower their eyes. For years pass. The king wakes from his drunken rage and realizes what he's done. The palace feels empty. The throne room echoes. But Persian law can't be undone, not even by a king. The Medes and Persians had made their laws unbreakable by design. Once written, a decree stood forever. Even the king who wrote it couldn't change it. So his advisors proposed something else. Something that reveals just how disposable they considered women to be. A beauty contest, empire-wide. A search that would span from the Aegean Sea to the Indus River. Let beautiful young virgins be sought for the king. The order goes out to every satrap, every governor, every provincial administrator. Find the most beautiful girls. Bring them to Shushan. And here's what the decree doesn't say, but everyone understands: they won't be coming back. Every province must send their most beautiful girls, not women. Girls, the Hebrew texts use a specific word, narah, young women of marriageable age, teenagers, some as young as 13. They're brought to the palace, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, torn from their families, their homes, their lives. Farmers' daughters from Babylon, merchants' daughters from Damascus, nobles' daughters from Media, all reduced to the same thing, candidates. And then begins what the ancient text calls purification. 12 months of it. But this isn't purification. It's transformation. It's erasure of everything they were before. 6 months with oil of myrrh, a resin so strong it was used to prepare bodies for burial. It seeps into your skin, your hair, your lungs. You smell like death and preservation all at once. The oil burns, it stings. It never fully absorbs. Hege, the keeper of women, oversees this process with the detachment of a craftsman shaping clay. He notes which girls weep, which ones go silent, which ones still have fire in their eyes by month 3. The myrrh does something to your mind. It's a constant scent of death. The isolation in the women's quarters. You start to forget your mother's face, your father's voice, the name of the boy you might have married. Then 6 months with perfumes and cosmetics, trying to cover what the myrrh has done. It's trying to make you smell alive again. Oils from Arabia, spices from India, kohl for your eyes, henna for your hands. Lessons in walking, speaking, pleasing. 12 months of preparation for one night, one chance, one moment when your entire future is decided by a drunk king's passing fancy. Here's what happens to these girls. Each one spends a single night with the king. If he remembers her name in the morning, if he calls for her again, she might become a wife or a concubine. If he doesn't call, she's moved to the second harem, the house of concubines. Guarded by Shashgaz, whose name means lover of beauty. The irony is suffocating. A man who loved beauty, tasked with imprisoning it. And here's the horror that ancient texts mention almost casually. She would not go to the king again unless the king delighted in her and she was summoned by name. Read that again. Let it sink in like myrrh into skin. These girls, some barely 15, spend 12 months being prepared. One night with a king who's still mourning the woman he banished. And then a lifetime of waiting. Waiting in gilded rooms with silk cushions and golden mirrors. Guarded by eunuchs who will never touch them, never love them, never even see them as human. forbidden from marrying anyone else, forbidden from leaving, forbidden from bearing children unless called again, forbidden from having the families they might have had. Their bodies belong to the king, but the king has forgotten they exist. Not executed, but not alive either. They exist in a space between. Royal concubines who will never be queens, women who will never be wives, mothers who will never hold children, girls whose names will never be remembered. The Greek historian Herodotus records that Persian kings had hundreds of concubines. 360, according to some accounts. One for every day of the year. The archaeological evidence from Persepolis shows separate women's quarters, vast complexes of rooms, where these women lived their entire lives. Courtyards with no exit. Windows that looked onto walls. One night with a king, a lifetime in golden captivity. The psychological torture of it, waiting for a call that will never come. Dressing every day as if today might be the day. Growing old in rooms full of girls who stay forever young. And if you refuse to go to the king at all, well, they'd already made an example of Vashti. The servants would whisper her name like a curse, like a warning, like the ghost she'd become. But the story doesn't end there. One girl, her Hebrew name was Hadassah, becomes Queen Esther. The king loves her. Places the crown on her head that Vashti once wore. She hides her identity. She's Jewish, but the king doesn't know. Her uncle Mordecai warned her, "Don't tell anyone who you are." So she wears the crown of a banished queen and pretends to be Persian, pretends to belong. And years later, when her people face genocide, Esther has to make a choice. A man named Haman has convinced the king to issue a decree. On a single day, across the entire empire, every Jewish man, woman, and child will be killed. Their property will be seized. Their names will be forgotten. Mordecai's message arrives like a knife. You have to go to the king. You have to stop this. But there's a law, the same unchangeable Persian law that destroyed Vashti. No one, not even the queen, can approach the king uninvited. The penalty is death, unless he extends his golden scepter. Esther sends back, "I haven't been called in 30 days. If I go uninvited, I'll die." Mordecai's response cuts deeper. Don't think you'll escape because you're in the palace. If you stay silent, deliverance will come from somewhere else, but you and your family will perish. Then he adds the words that change everything. Maybe, you were made queen for exactly this moment. For exactly this moment. 12 months of myrrh. One night with a king. Years of silence. All leading to this single choice. Esther sends her final message. Gather all the Jews. Fast for 3 days. Don't eat. Don't drink. Then 5 words that echo through history. If I perish, I perish. She puts on her royal robes. She walks through the palace, past eunuchs who know this could be suicide. She stands in the inner court, uninvited, breaking the law no one breaks. The king looks up. Silence. Then he extends the golden scepter. But here's the bitter irony. Esther's courage only mattered because Vashti's courage had been punished. The decree that destroyed Vashti is still law, still carved in stone. Vashti's refusal didn't free women, it made their chains legal. In the 1930s, archaeologists found administrative tablets at Persepolis, payments to women in the royal household. Some names appear once purification treatments, then nothing. These were the girls who weren't called again. Other names appear for decades, small stipends. They lived their entire lives on royal support, never called, never released. One tablet shows payment to the women who were not chosen. That's what they became. Numbers in ledgers. And here's the detail that changes everything. The tablets show that even after Xerxes died, these women remained in the palace. His son, Artaxerxes I, inherited them. They were property. Assets passed down like furniture or livestock. Some of these women were in their 50s. They'd entered the harem as teenagers. They'd spent 40 years waiting for a king who is now dead, and they kept waiting because there was nowhere else to go. That's what Xerxes did to his wives, to the women in his harem. Not execution, erasure, not death. Living death. The Book of Esther never mentions God's name, not once. Scholars still debate why. But maybe the absence is the point. Maybe the silence around God's name mirrors the silence around Vashti, around the hundreds of unnamed girls in the harem. What survived? A story. A scroll that Jewish communities read every year at Purim. They cheer for Esther. They boo at Haman. They celebrate deliverance. They celebrate courage. They celebrate the woman who risked everything. But Vashti's name is complicated. Some rabbinic traditions paint her as cruel, a woman who forced Jewish women to work naked on the Sabbath. Others see her as the first feminist. A woman who said no when no one said no to kings. A woman who chose dignity over survival. The archaeological evidence shows something else. The women's quarters at Persepolis were built like a maze. Narrow corridors that twisted back on themselves. Small rooms with single doorways. Only one entrance to the entire complex, guarded constantly. Not a home, a beautiful prison. A gilded cage with walls 30 feet high. The windows looked inward onto courtyards with no sky. The doors locked from the outside. Persian law changed after the empire fell. But the pattern didn't. The idea metastasized. Harems in the Ottoman Empire. Purdah in Mughal India. Footbinding in China. The ideas that Xerxes' decree represented that women's obedience must be legislated. That their bodies could be collected like treasures. That their will must be broken for society to function. Those ideas persisted for millennia. They evolved. They adapted. They found new justifications in new religions, new philosophies, new legal systems. They remembered the sound of silk curtains closing. They remembered the silence that followed when a woman disappeared. They remembered that no one came to help. And some of them wrote it down, in fragments, in margins. In tablets pressed into clay with desperate fingers, so we would remember too. You're back where we started. The smell of myrrh. The marble floor cold beneath your feet. The eunuch approaching with empty eyes. But now you know why that smell mattered. Why the oil was myrrh, specifically because it was used to preserve the dead. You understand now that this wasn't preparation. It was transformation. It was death before dying, turning living girls into living ghosts, into women who walked and breathed and ate, but had already been erased. The palace at Shushan is ruins now. Archaeologists walk through the women's quarters with their careful brushes and measurement tools. The rooms are empty, the walls crumbling. But if you stand there at dawn, when the light hits the stone just right, you can still see them. The grooves worn into the doorway, hundreds of feet, thousands of days. Decades of women walking the same path, waiting to be called, pacing the same courtyard, watching the same unchanging sky, growing old while staying trapped. The tablets record their names: Hege, the keeper of the women; Shashgaz, keeper of the concubines. The guards and administrators who managed this system with the efficiency of accountants. They had titles. They had purpose. They were remembered. But most of the women? No names, just descriptions, just categories. The virgins who were gathered, the women who were purified, the concubines who were not called. Vashti refused, and they made her a warning. The others obeyed, and they made them invisible. Both fates worse than execution, because at least execution ends.